Hello, everyone, and welcome back into the EPAN to the UKV pod. I'm your host, Drew Pitzer, joined by my co-host, Josh Carpenter. And today we have a very special guest, the head coach of Lipscomb University, Kevin Carroll. Coach, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing, my friend?
Doing great. Drew, Josh, pleasure to be on here.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you, Coach. I'm super excited to talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were kind of talking about this before the pod, before we even get into who you are as a coach and where you're at it with Lipscomb. We were talking about Jake Stevens, and we had Jake on the pod here about 6 weeks ago. Can you speak on kind of the impact Jake had on your program when you were at VMI and what type of person he is?
Oh man, that would just be a pod in itself right there to be able to talk about him. He was honestly just one of the most competitive and greatest kids that I've ever coached. And this is year 26. And, just a self-made player. I remember in his recruiting process, we were the only Division I school to offer him. And, I remember asking a lot of people just in the area who'd seen him more than we had, what they thought of him. And they're like, good player, but just a Division III athlete, can't move, can't jump, can't do this, do that, whatever. But I think a lot of times in evaluating what people don't pay attention to enough, it's just kind of like, how competitive in their heart and just all the little intricacies that go into making a player a great player. And, what he lacked, physically at that time, he more than made up for in the way that he approached his craft.
No, for sure. Absolutely. Josh, before I hand it over to you, Coach, if you kind of just want to introduce who you are as a coach, you've already said you've been coaching for 26 years, quite a few stops along the way. We'll give you a quick 30 seconds or so to go ahead and give you an introduction of yourself.
Yeah. This is, like I said, year 26, heading to my first year as the head coach at Lipscomb. I was previously the head coach at Trevecca Nazarene. I've been the head coach at another Division II school, Maryville University of St. Louis, and I actually started out in the high school ranks. Kind of a nomad a little bit, I like to say, some people were born on third base. I was more the guy that got hit in the back and then bunted over to second and reached third on a wild pitch, but blessed to be back here at Lipscomb. It's a very special place and excited for this new team that we have.
Perfect. I appreciate that, Coach. And Josh, go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. So, Coach, you've been a lot of places in 26 years. What do you think are some major things that you've learned from your first couple stops, even at the high school ranks? How has that molded you as a coach?
Yeah, this is year 13 as a head coach, and it's my fourth stop as a head coach in county high school. And really, honestly, very blessed for my path because I was able to, cut my teeth at the lower levels where really when you make a lot of mistakes like I did, they don't get noticed as much, So, and you're not as averse to doing things that maybe, give you a chance to be a little bit different or whatever in terms of worrying about what the media is going to think or what all these other people are going to think. I was always Lipscomb's a different job for me. It's a really great situation. We have unbelievable facilities. It's in the heart of Nashville, Tennessee. It's got a ton of tradition. My first three jobs were at places where, they had inherent disadvantages in terms of the competition that they played. Having to learn how to think outside the box and figure out how to find ways to scrap, a few wins here or there when you didn't maybe have the facilities or the scholarships or the tradition or whatever. I think that was really something that really benefited me in my coaching journey, and I'm very thankful for.
Let's stay on that for a second. I'm from a super small town in West Virginia. What is it like in Nashville? What's the city like? What's the college life like? What does that feel like compared to other stops you've been? And
Yeah, I'm very lucky in a lot of ways to live in Nashville. I've lived here for 6 years. I was an assistant here at Lipscomb, then went to go be the head coach at Trevecca across the road, and then now coming back. So I've got to be the only head coach in college basketball history to get two head coaching jobs and not have to move houses for either move, So I'm very blessed for that. And I'm also blessed just, some different places I've lived. I've lived in some awesome places. I started coaching high school basketball in Atlanta. Got my first college job in Huntsville, Alabama. Lived in Colorado Springs, Colorado when I coached at the Air Force Academy.
Oh, that's
Lived in
sweet.
lived in St. Louis when I was at Maryville and got to live in Virginia when I was at VMI before coming back to Nashville. And so I've lived in some great places. I can unequivocally say this is the best place we've lived. It's an awesome, Nashville is one of the hottest cities in the country and for good reason. The vibe, the music scene, the food, the people, And Lipscomb is just very unique in who it is and very special. And so, we're not hurting, that's for sure, in terms of location.
Yeah, for
Yeah, coach. So again, you speak on being a Tennessee boy. I have family that's from Knoxville. Do you kind of target a lot of recruits actually from the state of Tennessee because I don't think they get enough love for the type of talent and product they create every year, especially from a guard position in Tennessee.
Yeah, yeah, we do. Now there's a lot of great programs right in this area, though. When you count, teams like Belmont and Chattanooga and Tennessee State, Vanderbilt. There's Middle Tennessee State. There's 5 Division I schools, all within 30 minutes of each other here in the Nashville metro area. So, and a lot of times, you may have to go further out. Yeah, we do target a lot of the better Tennessee players, so does everybody else, and you got Chattanooga
Of
right down the
course.
road too. Um, so a lot of times you may have to have a little bit different, unique approach. This year we have 3 international players. We've made a little bit of a market in signing good Division II players. We've already gotten commitments from 3 players that are probably a little bit more out of region in this 26 class. So you kind of go where the fit is, and I think that's one benefit from, the places I've been and the staff that I have is we have a lot of different, contacts in different parts, not only of the country, but just different parts of the world that we can identify to be good fits for Lipscomb.
For sure. And Josh, before I hand it back to you, obviously taking over a Lipscomb program that was in the NCAA tournament last year, coming off a phenomenal season. I don't know how many players you got back from that team or what you landed in the transfer portal, but what are your expectations going into the season, trying to get back ultimately to the dance again?
Yeah, that's a little bit of a mixed bag. Today's day and age, it's all about retention, and usually and that's why they had such a great year last year. I mean, they were able to retain 3 all-conference players, or the guys ended up being all-conference players, including a kid that ended up being the player of the year in the league, and is now playing at Washington. So we do have 6 players, scholarship players, returning off last year's team, which is great. Now, a lot of those guys but at the same time, we lost our top 5 scorers. So we don't return anyone that averaged over, I believe, 5 points a game. But that's a great opportunity for those guys coming back, and they've really helped establish our culture. And now it's their turn to, try to carry the reins and keep that winning tradition going.
Yeah, for sure, coach. I really appreciate that. Josh?
Yeah, coach, how do you think in this day and age you do retain players? What are some effective strategies? Do you think it's more just the character of the guys that you target, or is there a way to kind of retain the guys you do have that might not know you?
Well, I think a couple things on that. Number one, Lipscomb is a unique place, and I think we work very hard to recruit people who are a great fit for Lipscomb, you know, and I think too, even with all of the NIL and the social media and the transfer portal and all this stuff, I still think our most basic human need is connection. And I think we work really hard to try to build that connection with our players, with our fans, with our alumni base, with people within the school. And so really that connection, I mean, we spend a lot of time with our guys. We try to really just invest in them and things outside of just basketball, like including like a life skills training program that we have. It's a big part of who we are and how we develop people. And we just try to make it more than just, much more than just about what, offensive schemes to run or what pick and roll coverage to utilize or what out of bounds plays to run.
Yeah. Go more in detail about that, coach. Say when you get a new job and you have guys that maybe were already on the team that don't know you, and how do you build that relationship and get them to trust and respect your voice? How do you get them to just respect you in general?
Yeah, what we like to say is that honesty and vulnerability lead to trust, and trust leads to a relationship. And once you have a relationship with someone, that's the only time you can really hold them accountable. So I think we try to work very hard on being very honest and direct with them in the recruiting process. We're not trying to, I tell people all the time, I started out being a high school math teacher for 6 years. And
Yeah, I
um,
love that.
yeah, I thought I was a pretty decent teacher. I would be a terrible salesman, so I think what we try to do is just educate them on how the recruiting process works. We try to educate them on what's a great fit for Lipscomb. And we try to just be very honest as to where we see them and how things, what we're looking for and how they fit into that, and And I think out of that recruiting process, it builds a certain level of trust. I tell, our recruits all the time is like, the biggest compliment you can give me is that a year from now, tell me it's exactly like you said it was going to be, you know? And I think if today's day and age, if you're not honest and transparent, you're going to lose players, because the old days of, like telling a kid how just unbelievably great he is and how he's going to be starting for you when you think he's probably going to be redshirting for you, those days don't go too well with guys anymore, when they have
Yeah.
multiple options. So we just try to do that. And I think out of that, that honesty and that vulnerability with our team, breeds a lot of trust, which creates, a very strong connection and relationships.
I've been thinking about that recently a lot too. Like, how can you build an honest connection with players and athletes, like in a world that they do get a lot of salesman pitches? Do you think, like, I think the majority of the thing is like time. Do you think time is a big one in that too? Like, they see you show up every day, because a lot of relationships I've realized I've had is like the time was the biggest thing that built them.
Yeah.
Just they see me show up, I showed up, we talked more and more, and then kids earn that trust because they have so many people coming at them every day.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing, I went 6 years in between head coaching stints when I was at Maryville to VMI to an assistant at Lipscomb, then back to being a head coach at Trevecca. And the biggest difference I noticed in that 6 year span was just how much time you have to invest into your players and communicating with them and telling them what you're thinking. Because just in today's day and age, with they're constantly, there's a lot of noise, whether it be on their phones or from people talking, people around them or whatever. And if you're not communicating the message to them, then I've found that they are probably assuming the worst from you,
Right.
And so I think just constantly trying to be in communication with our players, I schedule, I try to meet with at least two guys every day, and so you're touching somebody, individually, at least one on one, once every 2 weeks. And, it's and that's not just, to be, robotic or whatever. I mean, really, we're just trying to build relationships with them. I mean, I think a lot of coaches would tell you they got into coaching for different reasons than what today's game, the transactional world that today's game has become. And we're just trying to ensure that it's still a transformational experience for our guys. And
Right.
with the understanding that, like, hey, it used to be you had 4 years to help transform a kid's life. Today's day and age, you may only have, 9 months, and that's fine. But the mission is still the same. That's still to help them build an army of difference makers in the lives of others. That's still to prepare them to have a full funeral, so that one day when that day comes, there's a multitude of people in that room, wanting to say thanks for the impact that they left on their lives.
Yeah, Drew, I want to stay on that for a second because I noticed that just looking on your social media, how you put a lot of emphasis on the person development, and I think that's lost a lot of coaches nowadays. I think they just want to use a lot of jobs as just a spot to level their career up as well. But I've noticed on yours, like you put a lot of emphasis on person development, personal development. I definitely respect that.
Yeah, and I think, first of all, I've never taken a job to leave, and that's the case with this. I mean, I would hope this would be my last job, because it's an awesome place, and, it's got everything that I've ever wanted. It's my dream job. I grew up going to camp here when I was younger. I grew about 2 hours south, right outside of Chattanooga. And this is just, I played against Lipscomb when I was in college. They were in the conference I was in. I wanted to go there, but wasn't quite good enough. But it has a special meaning to me, and to what it stands for here. But I just think, getting back to what we're saying, like what we're trying to do, and my mission has really nothing to do with, how many wins I achieve or how many championships we hang. It's more about how many lives can we impact. And, like I said, just, trying to build, I want to be an impactful coach, a transformational coach, the type of person that, when my day comes, and that's how we lead our program, and that's a lot of people say, how can you do that in today's day and age?
Uh-huh.
And my response to that is, how can we afford not to do that in today's day and age? So.
Yeah. What do you think determines like a successful coach? Because there's a lot of coaches that I'll look up online that they might not have a crazy great winning percentage, but there's some in the Hall of Fame. Do you think that's what separates what makes a good coach is those things right there?
Yeah, you know what? I think what I learned a while back ago, after being in some hard jobs and things of that nature, was that, I think as coaches, we understand we're all going to be evaluated by what the scoreboard says.
Right.
We may have 2,000 people at our first game or whatever it is, but and probably 10 of them will know who I am intimately and know what I'm about and know what I stand for. The rest of them are just going to judge you based solely on what the scoreboard says. And I think you have to understand that. What I've learned though is that what I try to do is there's three things that I evaluate myself on. Number one, am I getting the team and the players to do what we're trying to get them to do as a staff? Number two, am I helping create memories for them they're going to last long past their career and make them want to come back and be a part of Lipscomb?
Right.
And number three, are we helping them learn what our program culture is? This culture that we refer to as live your legacy. So that's what I'm constantly evaluating myself on.
Mm.
And I think that, and not to be braggadocious here, but like I've been a head coach 3 times. I've taken over programs much different than this one, ones that had single digit wins the year before I
Dude.
got there.
Yeah.
And within 3 years, we've broken a school record for wins at all three places, and I don't say that to point the light on me. I'm just saying, like, when it becomes about something other than yourself, our message is, look what can happen, and that's just really what it's about for me. And I still, maybe that's an old school mentality in a lot of ways, but I just feel like the more things change, the more they have to stay the same here at Lipscomb.
For sure. Drew, go ahead.
Yeah, coach. So kind of go back to the salesman portion of, you said, hey, like I would be a terrible salesman, but I just don't know if I agree with you because I think you already come off as somebody that's comfortable being uncomfortable. And every day that you're recruiting or you're out there on the recruiting pitch, you are selling not only the program, but yourself. How are you able to do that in a way that comes off as organic and authentic?
Yeah, I just think trying to be who you are, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just, you have to understand, if I'm having to change who I am to try to get a player to come here, that means it's probably not going to work out for either one of us. Like, and I've done that, like early in my career, I learned a lot. Like I said, I was fortunate enough to be in some places where I had the opportunity to learn from my mistakes and trying to fit a round peg, in a square hole or whatever, and I just think the longer you do it, you realize it's more just about finding the right fits for you, finding guys that you can coach, finding guys that you can connect with, and finding guys who are a great fit, for your institution.
Uh, For sure, coach. Not, and I really appreciate that too. And like you just said when you were talking to Josh, and you've been in 3 different places and set the win record 3 years after the fact. You took over a Trevecca Nazarene team that was 2-24. Now Trevecca has a rich heritage of being extremely good, especially when Josh and I played at Salem. They were a fantastic school. So to take over that team to go from 2-24 to 19-10, I believe, after 3 years, what did you do? Like, what's one non-negotiable that you have with every one of your teams?
Yeah, the non-negotiable was you're just going to live, you're going to live our program culture, and I tell you, listen, there's the secret is there is no secret in this deal. You know what I'm saying? Like, it takes,
Yeah.
it takes luck. It takes some things, like we have a couple of really good players at Trevecca, and a place like Trevecca, they did have a great, tradition back when they were NAI. They've been Division II now for around 15 years, and have had some really good coaches. Just there's some inherent, things there that just probably make it a little bit more difficult at times. But we were very fortunate to get a guy like Jalen Page, who had averaged 2 points as a junior at another school in another Division II school in Tennessee. Came to us and was all region for for the next 2 years playing for us. He was a guy that went from averaging 2 points a game to 19 points a game and then 21 points a game this past year. We had a guy named Jakari Johnson, who, is at Chattanooga now, that was a walk-on JUCO kid, went to Mount Olive D2, never played,
Wow.
transferred to a D3, had a great year, averaged like 17 points a game, and came to us, moved up and averaged over 20 points a game this past year. And now he's, would have probably been here at Lipscomb if he hadn't committed to Dan Earl, who I worked with at VMI before I got the job at Lipscomb, So, but I think the main thing is just, once again, we are in a world where a lot of it is just about how can I do what's best for me? And we're still promoting a culture where how can we do what's best for us? And we were able to, I think, accomplish that, in terms of getting guys who fit that. And like I said, it's just amazing how, it's amazing to see what can happen sometimes when you just make it about something other than yourself.
For sure.
Sure. So, Coach, I just got two more questions before I toss it back to Josh. Obviously, you guys have a pretty big time schedule this year. You're going to be playing at Marshall and at Duke.
We are, and Vanderbilt.
Vanderbilt,
And
Cincinnati.
Andy,
Cincinnati.
There's
And
some
I knew
there's
Cincinnati.
some
So,
Cincinnati
great
too.
coaches. Great coaches matched up this year. Like, you gotta be jacked up for these matchups.
you know what? They'll be really fun, probably for about the first 4 minutes, and then we get to that first media timeout, and we'll see where it goes from there. But no, hey, these are great opportunities for us, and this is why
Yes,
you come to
sir.
Lipscomb, is to be able to play in these type of games. I mean, like, we tell the guys all the time, listen, Duke didn't recruit anyone on this roster. Vanderbilt didn't recruit anybody on this roster. But for one night, we get a chance to go out there and play as well as we possibly can, be as great at our system and the way we do things that we possibly can, and just see what happens. No pressure on us, but at the same time, like, every kid grows up in the backyard, shooting on the bat on its goal, thinking about the opportunity to play in Cameron Indoor Stadium.
Mhm.
Yep. Mm, man,
Yeah.
I tell you what, playing in Cameron Indoor would have been. I've been there before, and just the aura of the whole atmosphere is just
Yeah.
insane. But again, you talk about playing those type of teams, and you have a natural chip on your shoulder as we speak with you. How do you like relay that message to your guys? Be like, hey, nobody's giving us a chance, but if everybody's counting us out, at least we're not. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think here's the thing: it's like, what everybody else thinks is like every other message we're giving them. What everybody else thinks doesn't matter. What matters is the message inside this circle, and the belief inside this circle. And listen, I'm not sitting there saying, hey, we can go beat Duke by 20 points or whatever, but
Right.
I'm going to say, hey, listen, it's just amazing once again how when you can really buy in and go from learning what this culture means to living this culture and eventually leaving that for someone else. It's just amazing when you kind of have a whole team, a whole organization, a whole locker room
Right.
kind of invested in that. It's just amazing how sometimes things just, pan out in ways that no one thought was possible. I remember, like, when I was at Maryville, St. Louis, we're Division II. So when the only reason I got the job, I was 31. The only way I got the job was they were in one of the worst Division III leagues in the country, and they had this really good AD with a lot of foresight to help improve the vision for the school. And he moved them into the GLVC, which at that time was the best Division II league in the
Yeah.
country. A bunch of those teams are now Division I. And so we're like playing in this middle school gym with 3 scholarships and playing in this unbelievable league with, now I think there's 4 or 5 teams now that are now Division I. And I remember we beat Bellarmine, beat the 4th ranked team in the country one game. You know what I'm
Wow.
saying? And who had just won a national championship, I think, a year or two before. So it's like, the thing about it is you buy into what you're about, you buy into what the mission is, and you lay it all out there, and sometimes you get rewarded for that.
I love
Yeah, for
that. Josh, go ahead and wrap us up, my man.
Yeah, I got just one more, Coach. I just wanted to start by saying we appreciate you joining. I respect the way you handle your program, like the way you take it. You take personal development over outcome, and I think that is the hack to get the best outcome. So I think
Yes,
that in
sir.
this day and age, I think you approach it in a nice way. Last one for me, I just wanted to ask for younger coaches, whether they're high school coaches that want to advance their career in the future, or just any younger coaches in general. I like closing them with, like, what would your advice be to them?
Yeah, my greatest advice would be never pass up on a basketball opportunity. Like, I'll give an example. Like, I went to a round table, about a month ago, and there's just a lot of things that, like, I've been doing this for a long time, and there were a lot of things that came away from that have kind of changed what we're doing this year. I'm saying that I think are better. And I could have said, well, I've got my family, I've got things going on, or I've got this at work, or I need to do this. But it's just like, you never know when you don't pass up on basketball opportunities, who you're going to meet, the connection you're going to make, the information you're going to learn. The second thing, I think, my second job, I was a high school assistant coach in Atlanta, and I worked for a guy named Lou LaFave. And one thing he taught me was, like, he was like, hey, you're always going to these things, clinics, going to watch people practice, stuff like that. That's awesome. But, like, have you ever thought, just like, hey, try to figure it out yourself? You know what I'm saying? So I think it's been a combination of that. Of, like,
Right.
in some ways, what we've done hasn't just been because what, you know, Kansas is doing or North Carolina is doing or whatever. It's been like, hey, what makes sense to me? You know what I'm saying? And what I'm always sitting there trying to think like, and like put myself in the mind of a player and like what would make sense. Like when I was a high school math teacher, I'll be honest, I was probably the dumbest math major at my school. You know what I'm saying? I mean, like, uh, there was a lot. I'm like, what is going on here? So when I got to be a teacher, that probably helped me because I could put myself in the shoes of someone who didn't intuitively understand math. So like figuring out ways to teach them that makes sense to them, was always kind of a strength of mine. And it's something that like Lou taught me a little bit more too, as well. So very grateful for that.
Coach,
Well,
we
hit
really
me up.
do
We'll take care
appreciate
of you
your
guys.
time today, man. We really
Yeah,
appreciate your time.
seriously,
We were
it's
excited
much
to talk
love,
to
man.
you. Yeah, we
Anybody
really
from Bunker
appreciate it.
Hill is a friend of mine. I guarantee you that.
Yes, sir.
And we want to again shout out Lipscomb head coach Kevin Carroll for hopping on the EPAN to the UKV pod today. We really appreciate your time. Make sure you guys tune in and watch them all year as they're going to try to get back to the dance, maybe pull up a couple Cinderella moments against Duke and Marshall along the way. So again,
Let's
Coach,
go.
thank you again for stopping on, and we hope you have a great rest of your day, my friend.
Appreciate you guys.